Hello, everyone. Welcome to another session. In this session, we'll look at upgrading NSX-T using Ansible. So welcome. My name is Madhu Krishnarao. I'm a technical product management from NSBU. So of course, this session is focused on Ansible and NSX-T. But before we dive into it, just a quick view into what an Ansible module is. If you're already familiar with Ansible, this shouldn't be anything surprising. Ansible is just an automation engine built on modules and plugins, typically written in Python. It works on a set of inventory files. So the users interact with the inventory files, they use the playbooks, they use tasks, and they perform operations. And these inventory files can be hosts, this can be networking switches, TARs, anything that you want, any endpoint. Now, NSX-T is no different. So we do have Python modules, plugins for Ansible. It uses the NSX-T REST API underneath. So it's actually very straightforward and simple to follow through if you're looking at the code. And in terms of requirements, it's just like any other Ansible system. It requires Python and Ansible, of course, specific versions. And we also interact, or the Ansible modules also interacts with vCenter. So you do need PyVMommy. And if you are doing an install, although not covered in today's or in this session, if you do want to do an install, if you want to try it out, OVF tool is required because that's what Ansible uses underneath to deploy the NSX-T manager. Now, in terms of the Ansible module itself, of course, I've written it's supported and it's open source. So all the development, all the code is already on GitHub. It's free for anyone to use, anyone to modify and use it in their org. You can submit pull requests, you can contribute code back, plus specific branches of the repository are actually supported by VMware. So you can call up VMware support and ask for help. This is just a slide kind of showing the same thing. There are kind of two ways we release the NSX-T modules, whether it's for upgrade or for anything else. One is, of course, available in the VMware's official download site. The second one is through GitHub. You can get the code from either one of these two places. And depending upon what branch you use, you will get full support. If not, it's a best effort community-driven support. But that said, because since all of the development happens on GitHub itself, us and all the developers are very active. So if you find an issue, the turnaround time is pretty quick. Again, jumping a little bit into what Ansible actually looks like. If you're familiar, you will notice that this is just a playbook. So if you're not, I've kind of tried to break it down into simple blocks. From a concept perspective, you have inventory, tasks, and place or playbooks. Now, inventory is the host or nodes, the endpoints that Ansible interacts with. In this case, even though it's NSX-T, the AP, because its interaction is through APIs, the Ansible modules just uses the local host to make those API calls. This is true for install or config or upgrade. So that's why we just have host as local host here. Then you can have variables file. This is just one way of doing it. You can have variable files in the format of JSON, in YAML format. It's declarative. It's up to your convenience. In this screenshot that I've put up, it uses a variable substitution, specifically Jinja 2 variable substitution. Anything that you see with curly brackets, that's a variable from an Ansible perspective. And those variables are defined in the variables file. Now, a playbook itself consists of course, a list of tasks. You can have one or many. You can have a single playbook with just one task and one module inside it. Or you can have more than one. The design is entirely up to you. It's pretty user-friendly. I was talking about install and config using Ansible modules. Of course, the Ansible modules do support all of it. If you're looking at install, I'll just quickly glance over this. You can deploy a NSX node. You can configure that with vCenter. You can create a NSX cluster. You can prep your ESX hypervisors or KVM hypervisors with NSX and make them what we call as transport nodes. You can also deploy edge transport nodes, create transport zones, create edge clusters, and have everything ready for consumption, all of it through Ansible. Once your system is ready, you will, of course, start creating logical objects. You can create your routing constructs, your switching constructs, your firewall constructs. You can tag your VMs. Of course, you can also tie it with vCenter Ansible modules and power on the VMs to actually build a powerful automated solution. Going, of course, the focus of this talk is upgrade. So from an upgrade perspective, typically when you have NSX-T, when we say we have NSX-T, it assumes that you either have a single node NSX-T or a cluster. You already have hosts that are prepped for NSX. You have edges and edge clusters and transport zones. So when you're upgrading all of this, these items are the ones that are kind of probed and validated, and the bits inside these are upgraded. The logical constructs like your routers and switchers, they don't have to be changed during an upgrade. Now, the upgrade process is actually pretty simple and straightforward. I will be switching back and forth between the UI and the Ansible code to kind of show how they would look in the UI when you do a specific task through Ansible. The steps is what is written on the right side. The first thing that you would do is upload the upgrade bundle. So in my setup that I'm going to show, I have installed NSX-T 2.5 version, and my goal is to upgrade it to 3.0. So the first step I will be doing is getting the upgrade bundle from 3.0 and then uploading it to NSX. The second one is we have to update a subsystem called upgrade coordinator. So that part gets upgraded. Then NSX will know that what is the current system, what is the version that you're trying to upgrade to. It'll look at all your inventory and then kind of prep itself for an upgrade. Then NSX gives you ability to plan and group your objects. What I mean by this is, if you have 4 edge nodes and 2 edge clusters, you can group them based on that. You can pause your upgrade between each groups. You can do a serial upgrade. You can do a parallel upgrade. Same with hosts as well. So we'll look at how to do that with Ansible. This is basically you planning for your upgrade. After this, you are going to run pre-checks. It's always a good idea and highly recommended step to run a pre-check. Of course, do it through Ansible. It'll give you, show you any warnings, or it will talk about any things that needs to be fixed. Let's say you go back, do all those recommendations, fix everything. Now the pre-checks come up clean. Then all that is left is do the actual upgrade. It's actually a very simple step or one specific module that can do it. It will upgrade your edges, hosts, and your NSX manager all in one shot. After that, of course, you can run any post checks that you want. So as I said, this is open source and the code is already available on GitHub. The workflow that I just talked about in terms of upgrading NSX by uploading the MUB, upgrading the upgrade coordinator, making any changes to the plans and groups, doing pre-checks, they're all split as separate playbooks. This is just for convenience to kind of go back and forth between them. And they all have references to variables defined in the upgrade wires.yaml file. So let's jump into the GitHub code and look at that. So this is the main Ansible GitHub repository. It's open for anyone to go look at, to clone, to fork, to download, and start using. I wanted to kind of show the different branches. As I said, active development actually happens on GitHub. So you will see a lot of branches. The dev is the one where the actual development, the main development branch, that's where it is. But all the version 1.0, 1.1, and 3.0, these are the released branches. So you can pick, let's say 3.0, because that's the one with upgrade support. That's the latest one. If you go to examples, and upgrade, you will see the playbooks specific to upgrade. Now, before I go into each of these, I wanted to kind of show the overall structure. You have the examples folder, of course. Then the most important folder is the library. This is where all the modules are written in Python. You can go look at it. It just calls API calls in the backend. It does some pre-processing to make the user's life easier. But end of the day, it is using Python request modules. We have some unit tests and some kind of internal libraries that we want to use. The same root folder, I would say, has unit tests that you can try out, modify, and play with. But let's go to a specific use case, which is upgrade. And what I've done is already checked out the upgrade example on my setup and prep my NSX for upgrade. So jumping into that, this is my NSX-T environment. This is 2.5, which you can see, or 251. So if I go to system and upgrade, now if it is a new install and then you go to system upgrade, this is not the screen that you will see. You actually see this because I've already done uploaded the bundle, I've already upgraded the coordinator, and I've run some pre-checks before. So what will the UI look like? Well, I have a screenshot to show you what that would look like. This is how it would be. So if you just install NSX, if you're using NSX and then go to the upgrade tab, this is how the UI would look like. It'll ask you for the upgrade bundle, and whether through the UI or through Ansible, you upgrade. This is how it will look like once the upload has been completed. And then when you begin when you click on begin upgrade, which basically translates to upgrading the upgrade bundle subsystem, the UI will start looking like this. It kind of figures out that the version that you want to upgrade to is 3.0. In my case, this was the last time I run the pre-check. If it's the first time, it won't, of course, give you any data. And it'll give you information about each of the systems, whether all edge nodes have passed. Apparently, so it looks like I have some 2 issues with host pre-checks and 1 with NSX. Now, I do want to say that in my setup, so let me show you my inventory. I have just 1 NSX manager node. My setup is a small virtual server or a nested environment, so I couldn't put in 3 NSX nodes to form a cluster, but the operation and the workflow is exactly the same. I have 2 host transport nodes and 1 edge node. All right, going to the first playbook, which is upgrade or upload the MUB. It's very simple. It's actually pretty straightforward. All I'm doing is setting the variables file. We will look at that in a minute. And calling this specific module, upgrade upload MUB. This module takes in these attributes, host name of your NSX. It could be FQDN or IP address. Of course, the username and password, whether you want to validate the certs. So if you have self-signed certs, best to set this to false. The URL of the MUB itself, from where you can download it. You can have it on any HTTP server, just so that it can download it automatically. And a timeout, always good to put some timeouts and checks and balances when you're automating things. All right, let's look at the upgrade variables. It's, again, very short and very simple, I would say. I have defined my NSX manager details, my MUB URL. In my case, I am downloading it from a local HTTP server, my timeout, and I've defined a group with 2 of my hosts. I'll come to this a little while later. Now, as you can see, the input that I need to actually upgrade my entire NSX is just these few lines. You need, of course, the username and password, a MUB, and details about your hypervisors, because I do want to group them in a certain way. Otherwise, you have the ability to change things in the playbook itself, but best would be to keep everything in a single variable file. That way, the playbook itself can be ported across different systems, and you just have to change the variables file to match your system. The upload itself would actually takes about 5 minutes or so, at least on my setup, based on my connectivity between the two, my server and my setup. So I won't be running it to just save on time. Similarly, the next one would be the accept EULA. So when you go through the process of an upgrade, there is end user license agreement that you will have to accept during an upgrade. So this automatically does it for you. And I was talking about the subsystem called the upgrade coordinator. To initiate the upgrade of that, that is the first step that you have to do. Again, just call this one specific module. Here again, you don't have to modify anything in this playbook as long as you update the IP or FQDN of your NSX, specify the username and password in the variables file. You can take this playbook as is and then just run it to start the upgrade coordinator updates. Now, you might also have noticed that I have created symbolic links to my actual files inside the example folder. This is because the way our Ansible modules are written, it expects all the playbooks to be in the root folder because it references the libraries, the modules within the library folder. So one way is to either you can copy all your files over to the root folder, or I just like to work with symbolic links because that way there is only one actual copy of the file and it's available in the root folder. So I can edit the playbook or edit the variables. I can run the playbooks directly from the root folder without having to cd into different directories. All right, so we looked at the initial kind of setup that you have to do. Now is the update plan and update group. Now this is where things get a little bit more interesting when you're talking about upgrade. So for example, if you look at the UI, go to upgrade and go to edges, you can see there are a bunch of options. You can set, as I said, whether you want the order to be serial or parallel, whether you want to pause after each group completes, whether you want to check on specific items. Now, this is all entirely up to how you want to design your upgrade workflow. In my case, I just want it to be serial. I don't want all of my systems to upgrade at once. Plus, I also don't want to pause after each group. So this is my setting. Now, how do I translate this to Ansible? If I look at this overall upgrade plan, I have split this into two parts, one for the host and one for the edges. If you notice, the module itself is the same. I'm calling the exact same module twice, but the first time I'm doing it for component host, and the second time I'm doing it for the component edge. So it's just that I'll now have more granular control of how I want my hosts and edges to upgrade. So as you can see that in my host, I have set parallel is true. I also want to pause after each group. I definitely want to pause on error. State present just says that do this if this is not the current state. And these are my settings for the edges. Now to run this, I'll just call the playbook. Now I'm in my setup has privileges set up so that I need to do sudo so that my log files are written in ansible.log, which is in a folder owned by root. Typically, if this is not how you would set up your environment, that's totally fine. You can just run Ansible Playbook and give the playbook name. You can also control the verbosity, but in this case, I will just do it without it. So it's changing the upgrade plan. It will actually make all the required NSX-T API calls. So sometimes it's just a one-to-one mapping. One playbook, one module corresponds to just one API call in the backend, but sometimes it does not. It might be multiple ones. So Ansible, it abstracts everything for you. In a way, it's good. You don't have to worry about the intricacies of how everything is laid out. You just use your playbook and then run. So we see that my plan was updated. And if I can go check on my system. So I did say that my hosts, I want parallel. I do want to pause, and I want to pause when there is an error. So I've, of course, made these changes. Now, the next thing is changing the groups. This playbook itself, it actually can do two different things. I'll walk through each one of it. Of course, some of this, one type is commented out. I'll come to it later. But let's say you wanted to change the way your host upgrades happen. Now, if you're familiar with the way upgrades happen with NSX-T, if you take any host or a group of hosts and look at the upgrade mode, there are two types that you can do. One is in maintenance mode, which means the hosts have to be put in maintenance mode. So you either power off all your VMs or you migrate, remotion them over to another cluster, or there is an in-place upgrade that happens. Now, in this case, you can keep your VMs running. The hosts do not have to be in maintenance mode, but there will be a few seconds, maybe 1 or 2 seconds of packet loss if the VMs are actually doing continuous data transmissions. In most cases, this is typically okay because most applications can deal with a few seconds of jitter or packet loss on the system, on the network. But if your application is very sensitive to such disruptions, I would recommend going with the maintenance mode. If not, in place is fine. So let's say now I do want to do the in-place upgrade. So now it's by default, it's in the maintenance mode. Now if I want to do the in-place upgrade, what I'll do is change it into this configuration. I will actually do that. But before that, I also want to do a pre-check once, show the warnings, and then come back and make the edits. I have named, you can also notice that I've named the playbooks in a sequence with a numbered sequence. Just it's easier for me to kind of go from one to another. Running a pre-check, the playbook looks very straightforward. I'm just calling the upgrade pre-checks playbook. So run that. This takes a few seconds because it's actually checking your edges. It's checking all the hypervisors. It's checking all the NSX managers to make sure everything is in sync or everything is as expected. Now, remember, we had done the host upgrade mode as maintenance. And clearly, my hosts are actually not in maintenance mode. So I can show that to you. Going to my vCenter. You can see these are my two hosts that are prepped for NSX, which will go through an upgrade. And they're, of course, not in maintenance mode. So when I run the pre-check, the expectation is that Ansible will catch it and tell you about it. Now, it actually does that. It's no surprise that it catches it because it uses APIs in the backend and APIs, of course, to throw out the error if the requirements are not met. Ansible just catches that. Oh, in this case, looks like I've already updated it. So never mind. But I had done that last time. And if I go back to edges and look for the pre-check, the last time I ran this, you could see that there were 2 warnings. Each of these warnings was about the host not being in maintenance mode. I didn't refresh the screen so that this error disappears. But in the previous run, when I had done this, clearly the warnings are spitted out. Now to fix this, there are 2 things I can do. One is, of course, put the host in maintenance mode. The second thing I can do is actually change my upgrade method itself. Let's say I want to do in place upgrade because I don't want to put the host in maintenance mode. So that's very easy. Go back to your playbook. And instead of keeping the current configuration where it says the upgrade mode is maintenance mode, I will comment them out and unblock the option that says upgrade mode is in place. And because it's in place, it's a rebootless upgrade. So all I did was this. So now I want to run my update groups playbook. This will go ahead and make the necessary changes on NSX to, of course, reflect your settings. The changes are done. Now, if I go back to NSX and refresh, and look at the settings, you can see that the settings have changed. It's no longer in maintenance mode, it's in place. So you can do this back and forth. You can change it for each group. You have the control with Ansible. You can also see that the upgrade mode is in place as listed here. Now, again, run pre-checks if you want to, but I know it's going to go through. But then let me make sure there are no issues with NSX Manager. Now, it does come up with a warning. This is because I have not done any backup with NSX Manager. Now, typically it is usually a practice to back up your system before an upgrade. So there is a check in place to warn you about it. I haven't, of course, done backup. That's why the warning has come up. I can still go ahead, ignore the warning. So this is not an error, this is just a warning. So I can ignore it and still go ahead and do the upgrade. So to do that, all I do is run this specific upgrade playbook. Now, as I said, very simple, straightforward. Just uses the NSX-T upgrade run playbook. As you can see, it does not need any complex parameters because you've already made changes to your plan, to your group before you reach this point. And because it's separated out, you also get the flexibility to change things without having to upgrade. Or you have the ability to change things before you upgrade. We can see it in any which way. So now I will go ahead and upgrade, start the upgrade. This will, of course, take time. So in my setup, when I last did this, it took about, I think 40 minutes or so to upgrade everything. So I won't keep the screen going till 40 minutes are up. There's no point in staring at an Ansible output. But instead, we can just quickly look at what the screen would look like when the upgrade actually happens. That's it. So this is what you would see from an Ansible perspective when an upgrade is actually happening. Now, as I said in the description, this is where you can actually go take a coffee break, go have your lunch, come back, and then upgrade would be done. So at this point, if I go back to my NSX and then refresh this screen. You can kind of see the progress. So you can see that because I had set a specific preference in terms of what should be parallel and what should not be parallel, you can see that edges are now getting upgraded. You can go and look at what the exact state is. You can look at individual groups in terms of what their statuses are. You can also look at certain facts through Ansible. Now, of course, I can't do it in the same run. Let's say you do want to check what's happening. You want to check what groups that were available. There are other modules that are available on Ansible. So for example, if you look at the upgrade group facts, this is a very simple module. It just gets you the existing groups. So you don't have to switch to the UI to see what's happening. You have the way to look at what's currently in the system. You have the ability to get that information through Ansible itself, through these modules. So you can get that information, register it as a variable if you want to, and then make any other checks as needed. So similarly, there is a module which gives you the output of the pre and the post checks that runs during an upgrade. This is just a get operation, and you can run this as well. As I said, the modules are available, and I have split this as individual playbooks just to make it easier to kind of focus on one action or one part of the workflow at a time. You can include all of these modules in just one playbook and just go with it. The choice is up to you. And then, of course, the upgrade wires, as I said, very, very straightforward. So the process of upgrade itself is easy with NSX. You have to upload the bundle. You have to set your preferences, your groups, and your plan. You have to run a pre-check, make sure it is what you want it to be, and then just go with the upgrade. Of course, Ansible does error out if there are any issues. In my case, there shouldn't be. And at the end of the day, everything will be upgraded to 3.0. Your playbook is spinning till the upgrade happens across all three silos like Edges, Notes, and NSX Manager. Once all of them are upgraded, and if there are no errors, only then does Ansible come out with a success message. So that was it. That was a quick check on upgrade. That was a quick view into how you can do upgrades with Ansible. Now let me see if there are any questions. If you have any questions, feel free to put it on the chat. I will be able to look at them. I'll maybe give a minute or two to see if new questions come up. So one of the questions was that I think, so typically when people look at this, first question is, of course, support. Yes, it is supported as long as you use this version. Now, the second question is, what versions of NSX does this support? I have used 2.5.1 to 3.0. You can use this for 2.4 to 2.5, 2.5.0 to 2.5.1. Eventually, when we have the next update of NSX-T, you can use it for that one too. So yeah, just make sure you're using the code from the right branch and you're all set. That's it for today. Thank you for joining. Bye-bye.